Hi, this is Darcy Norman. I've been asked to do some screencasts to sort of do a demo of what the Eduglu concept is. What is Eduglu? How does it work? What are the ideas behind it? And I thought before I get into the screencast of Eduglu itself, of a working prototype, I think it's important to go through and talk about some background of what happened to form the creation of these sets of ideas that, when brought together, are loosely called Eduglu. Basically, it started in February of 2006, the day before the Northern Voice conference that year. There was a social software salon that Brian Lamb hosted at UBC. And basically it was a room where a bunch of people just got together and started talking about blogging in education and social software and what did it mean. And it was a very free-form discussion. Lots of people in the room. Gardner Campbell attended over Skype. It was this really, really interesting afternoon. But some themes came out, and it was things like blogging is not a class or classroom activity. Like learning can occur outside of the classroom. The learner is in control. The teacher and the professor, the instructor, is not the boss. And it's about more than just blogging, and it shouldn't need IT support. So when we start sort of mulling over these ideas, what does it mean for that? Well, there's some sort of logical progressions from there. So from there, I started tossing around the idea of this mythical school aggregator called Eduglu. Not my own invention. It was just an idea to talk about this stuff. But Eduglu, the name came from the Superglue website that is essentially an RSS remixer. We were sort of initially thinking of that in an educational context is where we needed to go. But Brian Lamb, his students at OLT at UBC, we're working on something called Aggressive, which is a really cool RSS aggregator that we thought might have some of the stuff that was needed for this Eduglu aggregator. How do you take things that are being published all over the web by students and contextualize it for use in the class? And that, we thought, might have been the first starting point for that. In previous lives, I was a software developer / coder. Not a great one, but I could do it. So my first reaction was, hey, let's go to the whiteboard and start building database schemas and class diagrams and whatnot. So I came up with this really overly complicated structure of what I thought might be needed to implement Eduglu. So I was going to start building code. That evolved a little bit. Basically, there's some major roles within the system. There's people, there's a person, there's the content that they're producing, whether it's on blogs, Flickr, Delicious, wherever, anything with an RSS feed really. And then they want to be able to do things like adding content to groups, adding feeds to the system. The feeds contain items, and there's various bits of community interaction. And then how do these things all interrelate? Users belong to groups, the feeds belong to users, items belong to feeds. How do these relate to things like the student information system on campus? So we started thinking this out. Early on, it started looking like Drupal might actually be a possible way to implement this. So I started thinking in terms of Drupal with the various RSS aggregator modules, like the Leech module, throwing in things like organic groups. Oh, actually, I didn't notice that. I was actually thinking about social ratings back in December '06. Okay, I'll come back to that later. And how does all of this disparate publishing, when it's contextualized for a classroom, how can that be used to do things like e-portfolios? I still at this point was thinking there'd be a bunch of custom code, so I created an Eduglu project on the EduForge open source website to hold all the code. A bunch of people signed up saying, hell yeah, let's pitch in on that. Since it was created in February of '06, not a single line of code has been checked in. That's actually a good thing, and I'll get back to that too. So the intention was to write a bunch of code for a custom education application. Turns out we didn't need to do that. So I wrote just some background actually on my blog about the what is Eduglu and sort of tying all this back together. Really important to mention, Bill Fitzgerald did some recipes on his funnymonkey.com website talking about using Drupal essentially as a basic RSS aggregator, and taking that stuff and tying it with organic groups, which is a really cool Drupal module. And then Cold Complete did some experimenting with the social rating modules using a Drig module, which is really interesting stuff. So all of these various people are playing with the ideas, and they start to come together in really interesting ways. There are other possibilities. I mean, when I say this one implementation is a Drupal website, there are many different ways to skin this particular cat. I was initially thinking of there's an application called BlogBridge Feed Library. It's very, very cool. Essentially, it's an RSS or a blog directory service that you can install on your own server. You can create your own groups and libraries and whatnot, and it does really cool things like providing web-based previews of the RSS feeds, providing OPML outputs of various at any level of the directory, so you can subscribe to just my group or my class or my department or my whole school. It supports full-on tagging, so this is another really interesting application that might have some legs for Eduglu. Blogbridge.com is where you can take a look at that, and it's under their, I believe, products. Their feed library product is under there. Very cool stuff. In my looking through everything with my Eduglu lens, when pipes first came out, I thought, well, hey, pipes might be a neat way to implement Eduglu. So we worked up really simple, well, not so simple, but it was kind of cool to do, a series of pipes and widgets within Yahoo Pipes that would let you take a set of OPML feeds, remix them and generate stuff. Turns out that wasn't quite as flexible on the individual point of view. It would be something that an instructor could do, but then each student would have to replicate the whole thing, which gets a little bit tiresome. So then basically over time, the Drupal modules have advanced, and the bugs that we were finding before have been taken care of, and they're so much more robust. So we keep coming back to looking at Drupal and these various modules. The recurring theme again is a lot of this development is being kickstarted, or the thinking is being kickstarted by the Northern Voice conference every year. The idea basically was born at Northern Voice, and each Northern Voice conference since then has sort of forced us to get together and think about this from different angles, which is kind of neat. I hadn't been convinced the whole time along that Drupal was the way to go, but it turns out that using these recipes, we've got a Drupal website that lets us do essentially what the Eduglu stuff is. So here's the Eduglu sandbox site. It's just Drupal 5 with a bunch of modules, things like organic groups, which is a really good one, views, which is a really powerful module that lets you generate essentially any database query you want, you can turn into a page. So you can say, show me things that are posted in the last 3 days that have been seen by 5 or more people and have 2 comments. And so you can create a page that does that. In this instance, I'm actually using a view on the front page, and it's taking advantage of groups and the social rating and a lot of the additional data in these Drupal modules. So this front page is generated by any content that has been posted to the site within the last, I believe it's 2 weeks, that has been rated by 3 stars or above. And so it's a good way to see, as users are rating content as it comes into the site, good stuff will be pushed to the front page. And the algorithm is completely flexible, so if we decide that's actually too general or too specific, we can actually do some really cool stuff. And this is going to be content that belongs into any of the groups that I'm a member of as well. So it's content, this should be content that I care about. But how does this work? You can actually go to, let's see, create content. And I'm going to dig up another feed that I've got here. I'm just going to go to a WordPress.com website off screen here. You don't need to see that. I'm just going to grab the URL of the entries feed. So I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to go back to the Drupal sandbox and say I'm going to create content of type feed. And I'm going to call this Open Content DIY because it's a blog that I created actually with Jim Groom for a presentation at the Open Education Conference. You can tag the feed itself, so we'll call this Open Content. Actually, that's all I'm going to do for now. Auto tags, the way I've configured this is Drupal is going to talk to the Yahoo auto tagging service and get it to automatically take a look at the guts of the content and tag stuff as it comes in, so you don't have to do too much. A body, this is a blog created by Jim and Darcy for the Open Ed 2007, I guess it was, conference. Then you go down here, you can say which groups should that be a member of. Well, let's add it to the Web 2.0 and learning. And these are just actually groups that I'm a member of. There might be 500 groups in the system, but these are the only groups that I care about because I'm a member, so they'll show up as my audience for this. One of the interesting things, you can actually, if you select a group, you can uncheck public. And that means that only people in this Drupal website that are members of that group will see this. So it's a good way to sort of find specific audiences for content, so you can cut down on all the extra noise. I mean, if you have a group of 500 students blogging and there's, say, 24 groups and all that stuff, there could be a lot of content coming through. But by messing around with the audience and public and tagging and groups and that kind of thing, it really helps you to define where content goes, who should be seeing it. I'm going to go down here to this feed URL and paste in the URL of the Open Content DIY website. I want it to refresh, I want it to do stuff, I don't want it to delete things. So I'm actually just going to go ahead, and if the demo gods are smiling, this should work. So right now it's actually going out to the blog, sucking the RSS feed in, and creating nodes within Drupal for each of the items. And it's just taking a second for some reason. There we go. So it's created it. There was 3 items in it. I can actually click on the feed items and it will show me these are the items within that blog. They're old, so I'm not going to bother tagging them because they won't show on the front page, or starring them, they won't show on the front page. But these are the items. These are actually copied into the Drupal site, so this is acting as an archive. If the WordPress site that I've aggregated from disappears, if it's deleted, there's still a record of this, and that's kind of important in the academic context because there's a sense of permanence, especially if this stuff is being used for evaluation and assessment. You need to be able to be assured that there is an archive, at least for the duration of the course and whatever appeals period afterwards. So you've got this here. But you can do things, I'll rate it, but it won't show on the front page. So we've got this, say I really like this piece of content, I can go ahead and give it, say, 3 stars. This one down here says paper nearly complete. Oh, that's great. I'm going to give that 5 stars. Now, as various people rate it, it actually calculates the average, and so we can set things on, how many people have voted, what's the average, what's the maximum vote, what's the spread, and so this gives us a high level of granularity, similar to what you get in your iTunes library with your songs. You can give the star ratings on that and build some really incredible smart libraries based on that, or smart playlists. And the idea is we could do that same kind of thing in here, essentially creating smart playlists of aggregated items. But let me go up through these tabs at the top. So we've got this About page, which talks about the site. We've got Feeds, which lists all of the feeds that are aggregated. Not a lot right now because we're just sort of in sandbox mode. Down the road, we'll have things like searchable features in here. Show me feeds that are tagged a certain thing, or just show me feeds by these people, or show me the feeds only in this group, that kind of thing. But you can see the things that have been added in here. We can click on Groups and show just the groups that have been added in here. And as it grows, you want to be able to search for things like, if I can type actually, Northern Voice, and it should just show me things that have Northern Voice in it. So that it will, especially as it starts to scale up, become really important to help find groups. One of the really neat things that we do with this is that if we let students create their own groups, they create groups that we wouldn't imagine. So if we take the traditional point of view where the groups are mandated from the LDAP directory, and you get the faculty and the department and the course and the session and whatever, that sounds interesting from the LMS side of things. Yes, those are official groups, we can trust that. But if you hand the keys over to the students and let them create their own groups, really interesting things happen. I mean, the story, people that have heard the story will be sick of it, but I'll repeat it one more time. We did a similar website like this as a community blogging service for our education student undergrads. And it was a Drupal community blogging site, and they were blogging things like their reflections after their student teaching exercises, how did the classes go, what were the lesson plans, successes and failures, that kind of thing. But we let them create their own groups. And it started off, they created very, sort of the general groups, the social studies teachers, the science teachers, that kind of thing. And then as the weeks and months went on, they actually really got into this, and it's like they hit the tipping point of usage within this, and they started creating groups. And the one that really surprised me was a group called Moments of Epiphany. And these were students that were blogging about moments of epiphany that they'd had in the classroom. So they created this group. It would have never existed in any LDAP directory. Social studies and science might have, but Moments of Epiphany, I guarantee, wouldn't. something like 12 students joined the group. So they created the group themselves, they found it, and they started joining it and describing these incredible, powerful moments that they were experiencing in their student teaching. Something that we would have never predicted when we were creating the site, but by handing the keys over to the students, some really interesting things happen. So I think that's one of the important things that we think about in this, especially as we're trying to take advantage of students essentially owning their own content and publishing in places that they control, that we honor that by letting them have control within this aggregated site as well. The My Feeds tab is a list of, and actually I've already added that open content DIY. So this is a list of the feeds that I've added to the site. So it's a good way, you want to see, maybe I decided I didn't really want to add this twice, so I can go ahead and delete something, or you can change the description or retag it, whatnot. It's a good way to get a touch on the feeds that you're adding in here. The My Recent tab could probably be renamed a little bit better, but it is a way to show me recent items in any of the groups that I belong to. So basically my recent items in things that I care about. And so this will filter if there are 500 students in the system, each publishing, say, 2 blog posts a day. I mean, there's 1,000 blog posts every day. You don't want to see all of it. You just want to see maybe the 20 blog posts that you care about. And so this My Recent will show you just the stuff being posted in the groups that you're a member of. And that becomes a really interesting way to filter things. And again, you can say, well, hey, WordPress header as a dynamic gallery. That's awesome. I'm going to give that 5 stars. Somebody else might come in and give it 4 stars. Oh, you can actually change your vote too. I forgot about that. And if you decide, well, you know what, I didn't really want to vote on that after all, I can cancel my vote. But I'm going to give it 5 stars, and then we'll go back to the front page, and it should be the top item there. One of the things that I think is important about this aggregated site, if you're letting students blog on WordPress.com and Blogger.com and self-hosted stuff all over the place, where does the discussion happen around this? Students would have to be tracking all over the web to be posting comments and discussing about this. But by aggregating this stuff in here, we can actually let these students aggregate in one place in the context of the class. So we can go here and actually comment on this. That's awesome, Jim. I need to check that out. Hopefully something a little more profound than that, but you get the commenting within the context of the class. So I'm going to go ahead and post that. The comments in this system are actually threaded, so I could reply to this comment and it actually creates threaded discussion forums based on any aggregated item, which is kind of powerful stuff. So you can get some really detailed back and forth discussions based on the things that are aggregated in here. So that's my recent. Recent items is recent items in the entire system, and it's in more of a table view. Again, it gives you a sort of really quick way to go through. So Alan wrote a thing about iPod touching. I'll give that 3 stars. Let's go down here. PS on guitar stars, I'll give that 5 stars. So let's go back to the front page and see what happened with that. If everything goes well, there we go. So the dynamic gallery is now the first item on the front page, and the guitar stories item was actually pushed on the front page as well. So again, I've left the algorithm really open right now. All it takes is one person to vote something 3 stars or above, I think it is. But as it scales up, you're going to want to have, this has to be voted high by 5 people, and things that have been voted within the last 3 days get pushed to the front. Yeah, all these kind of algorithms can be added in there. But one thing that happens here is we actually get, with these various tags added in, we can get a really interesting snapshot of the tag cloud of the content being used in the system right now. And this is actually using a view, so we can customize a little bit. We could, what I would like to do is show me the tags that have been aggregated within the last week or two. Right now it's showing all the tags that have been aggregated in all time. But if I do it just in the last week or two, or even provide date controls, it would be a really interesting way to follow the progression of topics through the semester or through the year, comparing and contrasting different groups. So I think this could be a really powerful interface to track the activity and the content of the website. Basically, that's how this prototype is set up. It's got a bunch of extra stuff that I could go into that would get probably a little more confusing than is needed. But it's got some of the networking, social networking, and group stuff in there. It's got the social ratings, so you can start prioritizing and filtering. It's got discussions tied to every item within the system, so that we don't have to go all over the web to comment. Oh yeah, well, actually one other thing. Scott Leslie mentioned this at our Northern Voice session on this. What about students who might not feel comfortable posting something on the open web? Do we have the right to compel somebody to open a WordPress.com blog and publish things for everybody to read? And I think he's got an excellent point. I don't think we have the right to compel people to do it. I think we can suggest that it's a good thing to do. There are cases where it doesn't make sense to do that. I mentioned our education project before. We couldn't have legally done that on the open web because we're talking about information with K-12 students that hadn't provided consent for publishing of that information. So we had to provide essentially a walled garden where the stuff could be blogged safely without being trickling onto the open web. Now what we can do in here, because this is just a Drupal website, oh, and actually I haven't enabled the module, but I'll show you how hard this will be. I'm going to go into the blogging module, or first I'm going to enable the blogging module. So I'm going to go, you're seeing the innards of Drupal that students will never see, but I'm going to go down here to the blog module, and I'm going to scroll quickly down to the bottom and save. So that's how hard it was to turn on blogging within Drupal. Now that I've done that, I can go to create content, and I see a bunch of extra stuff in the menus that students won't see. But now I can create a blog entry. And I'm going to say, this is my top secret blog entry. And I could, put whatever, Dear Diary. But then I can use things like the audience. So I can say, I only want people in the Northern Voices group to see it. I don't want it to be public. And by doing that, I can control who gets to see this in a way that I couldn't have done it with the open web aggregated weblog. Once it's on the open web, anybody can see it. Google can see it. The Internet Archive can see it, and there's no deleting it. But by putting it in here and controlling the audience, we get a lot more control over that. So if I do that, oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay, that's the trouble of demoing live. So I've got some debugging to do on that. But if I go to my blog now, there should be a new item. It's there. If I log out, actually, I shouldn't be able to see that. So I'm going to copy this URL. I'm going to log out. And again, if the demo gods are smiling and I go back to that URL, I don't get to see that item because I'm not allowed to. So we get the private walled garden, safe sandbox to blog stuff, as well as taking advantage of the publishing on the open web. And I think this is a really interesting sort of sweet spot combination of functionality that I think is pretty close to the ideal that Eduglu has been all along here. Again, I'm sure there are many other ways to skin this cat, but I think this is surprisingly close. And again, for writing absolutely no code and using just off-the-shelf code. And I think I'm going to stop the screencast there before I get off on too many more tangents. I'll talk to you later.